Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a specific logical audit report you shared.
Right.
It's about a financial decision support model called GRACE. That's the Global Risk Analysis and Compliance Engine.
hmm
And it basically helps lenders make a really critical call when a borrower defaults on, say, a floor plan loan.
Yeah, that fork in the road moment.
Exactly. Do you give them a grace period, what Grace calls Plan B, or do you just, repossess the collateral immediately? That's Plan A.
Simple choice, complex implications.
Right. So our mission today is really to pull out the key insights, the main nuggets from this audit. We want to show you Grace's strength, but also highlight some crucial logical nuances.
Things you absolutely need to grasp to use it correctly.
Precisely.
Well, what's really fascinating here, I think, is how grace takes what can be a very tough decision.
Yeah, potentially emotional too.
Absolutely. A defaulting borrower situation.
Hmm.
It takes that and puts structure around it. Makes it auditable.
How does it do that practically?
It sets up this clear financial comparison. Plan A is simple. Immediate liquidation, you recover a value based on the asset's recoverable amount. Like times some recovery rate R.
Okay, lang times R. Got it.
A plan B, on the other hand, involves potential borrower payments, let's call them P, during that grace period, plus a liquidation later on of whatever's left.
So it moves it away from just gut feeling.
Exactly. It shifts it to a quantified process. That's its power.
Right. That process is definitely the core strength. But like you said, the audit points out some really interesting details about how you interpret the model's output.
Yes.
And the first finding, it kind of hits you right away. This label, partial success, can be, well, surprisingly misleading.
This is where it gets really interesting, yeah. The audit points out that grace flags a situation as partial success if the borrower's payments, P, just managed to cover, well, only the liquidation value of the extra risk you took on.
Okay, hold on. So the threshold is ASR. Let's break that down.
Right. So AP represents the extra asset value, the extra risk you're exposed to because you didn't repossess immediately under Plan B.
Okay, the stuff you left on the table, basically.
Sort of, yeah. And RR is that estimated recovery rate, what percentage you think you'd get if you liquidated those assets.
So the model says success if the payments only cover the expected liquidation value of that extra risk.
Exactly. And that's the kicker. It means you could get that partial success flag, even though economically you've actually suffered a loss on that marginal decision. A real loss equal to R times 1R, the part of the extra risk you didn't recover.
Wow. So you see partial success, you might think, okay, not bad, but you actually took a hit compared to just taking Plan A right away.
Precisely. The terminology could definitely lead you astray if you're not careful.
So the audit suggests maybe something like strategic break-even would be clearer.
Yeah, something like that. Because you only broke even on the liquidation value component of that specific risk decision, not the full book value or economic value.
That makes sense. Okay, so that's one big nuance. What else?
Well, sticking with things maybe not being quite what they seem, the audit talks about this determinism paradox.
Determinism. Sounds solid, like it eliminates guesswork.
That's the description, yes. And it sounds great, right? Like the model just spits out objective truth.
Yeah.
But the nuance here is absolutely vital. The calculations inside Grace, they are deterministic. No question. Same inputs will always give you the same output.
Okay, like any calculator.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the most critical input going into the calculator, that estimated recovery rate, that's fundamentally subjective. It's a guess.
Your best guess about the future market, basically.
It's your estimate. So here's the aha moment, right?
Yeah.
Grace isn't some magic box eliminating human judgment.
Right.
It's more like a very, very precise calculator for running scenarios based on your subjective estimates.
So it structures the subjectivity, makes it transparent.
Perfectly put. It forces you to state your assumption that our value, and then it deterministically shows you the financial outcome, if that assumption holds true. Makes the whole thought process auditable.
That's actually really valuable, even if it's not pure prediction. Okay, what was the third finding?
Another subtle but potentially crucial point, especially for implementation, it's about possible ambiguity in a key definition if you're only reading the narrative text, not looking closely at the symbolic logic.
Like a potential pitfall if you're setting it up or using it day to day.
Exactly. It concerns how you calculate the remaining inventory that's actually available for liquidation after the grace period payments have come in. Let's call this LIN.
Okay, the leftover assets.
Right. The narrative description might just say something vague like remaining recoverable inventory.
Which could mean different things.
It could. But the audit clarifies, based on the model's precise mechanics, that only payments which came from actually selling some of that inventory, let's call those PR, should reduce the physical stock available for later repossession.
Ah, so if the borrower pays using outside cash, like personal funds or other income, PO or P.
Exactly. Those payments reduce the debt owed, but they don't reduce the physical inventory sitting there that you might still need to repossess and liquidate.
Got it. So the correct logic, clear in the symbols, but maybe less so in words, is like P, the initial recoverable amount minus only the proceeds from asset sales.
Correct. Not lank P, total payments.
And if you use total payments by mistake,
You'd underestimate the assets remaining for liquidation, which would mess up the financial comparison between Plan A and the tail end of Plan B. Skews the whole calculation.
that's a critical distinction. So, okay, we've got the potentially misleading success label, the subjective nature of inputs into a deterministic engine, and this definition clarity needed for a lay.
Right. But despite digging into these nuances, the audit actually confirms Grace's fundamental value.
And that value isn't really about predicting the future with perfect accuracy, is it?
No, not at all. It's about providing a rigorous, consistent, and crucially, an auditable process for making the decision.
It forces transparency around those key assumptions, like the recovery rate.
Which is invaluable.
Yeah.
For consistent decision-making across the board, for sticking to internal policy, even for legal defense down the line if things go sideways.
Because you can show your work. You can document the rationale at the time the decision was made.
Exactly. Regardless of how things actually play out later, which you can't fully control.
Okay, so pulling this all together for everyone listening, Grace seems like a sound model, logically. But you need to be a savvy user.
Definitely.
You have to interpret the outputs carefully, especially labels like partial success, and always remember that those critical inputs, well, they're your best subjective estimates being processed by a deterministic machine.
Understanding those kinds of details is really key if you want to use sophisticated models like this effectively and actually trust them.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? I mean, even a well-structured, audited model like Grace has these subtle points, these nuances that could potentially mislead you if you don't fully grasp the underlying logic.
Mm-hmm.
What other hidden assumptions or potentially confusing elements might be lurking in other reports, other data, other tools that you rely on every single day? Something to consider.